Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 137. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the show, has shared it, left us comments, liked the show, gave us ratings. All that support has allowed us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also, want to take this time to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment has been providing uncompromising quality for over 40 years. Samson products are long-lasting and made of the highest quality equipment on the market. Each project is built from the ground up with the ability to customize every need. The team at Samson focuses on developing the highest quality relationships with their customers, in addition to providing them unparalleled quality in every piece of equipment bearing the Samson name. Learn more about Samson's professional weight room solutions and the Samson standard at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_GAME to save on your next order. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Born in Scotland and stitched in America, Sport Kilt offers the highest quality custom kilts and accessories. Every sport kilt is made in the USA of machine washable polyester blend fabric, offering an alternate to the traditional heavy wool kilt. So make sure you check out the No Pants All Glory selection of kilts and shop the best collection of high quality American made sport kilts and accessories at sportkilt.com and use our promo code TSG to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Shannon Boone. Shannon is an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Florida State University. Joining FSU in 2020, she oversees training for the volleyball and beach volleyball programs. Prior to joining the Seminoles, she served as an assistant director of strength conditioning for Olympic sports at Georgia Southern, working with the men's soccer, swimming and diving, softball, track and field, and volleyball teams, in addition to overseeing all nutrition efforts for the Olympic sport student athletes. Boone served as an assistant at the University of Connecticut for the 2018 to 2019 season, working directly with men's and women's swimming and diving and the tennis programs, as well as assisting with softball, track and field, and volleyball. Before UConn, she was a graduate assistant coach at Mississippi State University from 2016 to 2018, in addition to spending time interning at both the University of Kentucky and Temple University. A former four-year college volleyball athlete, Boone competed in three Divisional III NCAA tournaments, including a 2013 run to the Elite Eight. Following her collegiate career, she continues to stay active and is an avid lifter and enjoys spending time outdoors, hiking, and backpacking with her husband and dog when she is not training in the weight room. Like I said, I'm excited to have her on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Shannon Boone. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited. We got kind of close distance rivals a little bit. Fellow coaches in kind of the beach volleyball world and in the Florida area. We've got Coach Shannon Boone on the show. How you doing today, Coach?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, I'm glad to get you on. I know right now as we're recording this, we're kind of before we even got recorded, started talking about kind of our season so far in the spring semester, and it's getting closer and closer to kind of that NCAA like conference tournament time. So you're off getting ready for another travel session, and I'm getting ready for a homestand. But I'm glad we could kind of get you on the show today. So, without any further ado, Ken, let's get kind of into how you got involved in training, sports, kind of play growing up, and kind of a little bit to like what you're doing nowadays that has got you in this athletic realm.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. So, I came to strength and conditioning by way of the sport of volleyball. I picked up volleyball when I was in fifth grade, started with, CYO, into middle school, high school club, all that type of scene. And that was definitely, I was just one of those kids that just loved it. I mean, I could take a ball in my backyard and just hit it against the house for hours on end. I just couldn't get enough. I decided, you know, definitely early in high school, I really thought I wanted to play in college, which I ended up doing, and kind of made my way through like the recruiting process. I was definitely under recruited, or I was recruited at a low level that was kind of fit for me. I was a walk-on at a small D1 school my freshman year, and that was kind of my first exposure to strength and conditioning. Kind of that same mindset, volleyball, as a volleyball player, um, that I kind of had that leaked out into the training aspect is like anything that would challenge me, I wanted more of. I wanted something that I could rise to an occasion for and kind of if it was difficult, I wanted to do it. And so that was my mindset and that was really what I found the weight room to be. My strength coach from that time, Michael Shoemaker, he's still someone that I credit a lot of becoming a strength coach too. And he was someone that really saw a lot in me that I didn't see in myself. And understood that, it was okay that I wasn't, like the top level recruit and I probably was not going to play a lot and I was only going to contribute in limited ways, but I was ready to work. And he kind of fostered that mindset in me that I could really make an influence by the way that I worked and the way that I would like rise to challenges in front of me. So that was a big piece of kind of getting into like the volleyball and strength and conditioning kind of as an athlete. The thing that I learned was that, every single day the plates weigh 45 pounds. And it doesn't matter if I'm at my best or my worst, but the plates are going to be the same weight every day. And so learning how to show up, like in spite of how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, and again, rise to those challenges. So that was a big piece of kind of my development as an athlete. As after my freshman year, I transferred schools. I went from a low Division 1 school to a Division 3 school. And when I transferred, there was no strength coach. There was like a student fitness center kind of that probably broke every rule in the NSCA textbook about facility design, to be honest. But I went from having a person that really invested in me and could help guide me to not having that. And I had my volleyball coaches, but I really missed kind of that outlet. The training that was accessible to me was very much like on my own. It wasn't really in a team setting, really. It wasn't maybe the most volleyball specific, but I found that atmosphere of like when I had opportunities to train, it was just with me for me. It was just my own me time, really. And again, like that mindset of rising to challenges was something that I love being in the weight room for. And so getting the chance to do that as an athlete on a lower level, being at a Division 3 school. So that kind of set the stage for me. And when I transferred schools, I changed my major to exercise science, and I didn't really have a plan. I just was needed to pick a major. And towards the end of my sophomore year, end of my junior year, I guess it was, I started really thinking about, what's next for me. I don't have the grades for physical therapy school. I don't really want to be in physical therapy anyways. And what makes sense for me here. And there was another coach at the time at the first school I went to, Bridget Hamill, and I started thinking like, I think I want to be Bridget Hamill. Like I want to be myself, but I want to be her. And so I reached out to her, hey, like I think I want to do this. What should I do? And so she recommended that I start studying for my CSCS and start looking for internships. So I started studying the summer before my senior year. I ended up sitting for my CSCS in the fall of my senior year before I actually had any intern experience, which knowing what I know now, I realize how unusual that was, but it worked for me. And yeah, so from there, I ended up getting an internship at Temple University. I was in the area. I lived in the suburbs I was finishing my undergrad at the time and interning at Temple, which was an awesome experience. I did a couple more internships after that, did my master's, and kind of hopped around a couple schools to follow. So yeah, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but the volleyball side into me as a coach.
No, that's perfect. I mean, it kind of blended together just like seamlessly. So it makes sense that those you kind of transition smoothly into the other one. Um, it's always interesting kind of to hear about how different schools are set up. And obviously Division 3 level is a little bit different with not only with the rules, but even understanding that like some of those schools have such different resources. And like I'm kind of an oddity. Some of the schools that people go to, like the school I went to, Salisbury, like exercise
Mhm.
science is like
Yeah,
the main component of it. So there's grad students that were strength coaches there and like only one full-time person, but you're still kind of training in that team atmosphere. So it's really interesting that kind of you had to figure it out on your own, but you had some guidance from some like pivotal individuals like from your previous school too that kind of guided you along the way and showed you that it's a possibility. It's always everybody's path, I think, is so different, whether you do internships or you study for your CSCS and haven't done them initially. Um, but I think that's great advice that they kind of gave you, just owning your role and figuring out what works for you. And I mean, there's no more important role than like the one that you currently have. So figuring
absolutely.
out like where you fit on that team and being able to kind of strive and like fight for your position. I mean, that's huge. And I think that's what a lot of coaches end up having. Was it like after that point in time, like really starting off your career, like was it pretty much solidified after the first internship, or like when do you think that like you found like the right kind of career path? Because usually as soon as you get to a point you understand like, hey, this is what I want to do coaching, but there's still kind of like the honeymoon phase before you really like settle into the weeds of it all and be like, this is the day to day, like this is actually what I want to do.
For sure, yeah. One quick note that I wanted to add that I think is just the coolest thing is that since I've graduated from Eastern University, which is where I was in school at, and we played Salisbury a few times in my college career, they have actually renovated an auxiliary gym into a two-story weight room. They have a staff, and it's awesome. The thing that like just it's just so awesome for me to see is that even now at national conferences, I actually will pass by people wearing Eastern University strength and conditioning, and I'm just like, this is so awesome to see. So I love like just one aspect of the profession growing, and even at the Division 3 level, like I think that's a really awesome thing to see. So yeah, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No, that's actually cool too, like to see the growth of it. Like I've even going back and thinking about like how Salisbury was, it's grown as well too, like just the facilities and the staffing, like oh, it always takes a little bit of time with those sort of things, but to
Mhm.
see that there's a precedence and some of the degrees have kind of like bled over to more staffing, more facilities, kind of more, I would just kind of a better care for understanding
Yeah.
that it's important for like, even the Division 3 level, any level of athletics, like having someone in that position or having resources available for it. That's awesome, and kind of know that you were like at the very beginning of that setup and kind of see where you are now. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I wanted to know like if there was a point in time like after you started getting your career, I think since you didn't have a lot of internships on the front end and you really kind of didn't have an idea of like what the day-to-day was going to look like. You got right into a couple, but it was like towards the end of your college career. So was there any point in time where you really were like, this is exactly what I want to do in my career. I don't want to go be in the private sector. I don't want to be anywhere else. Like I want to be in college. I want to work with collegiate athletes, and this is the career path I chose.
Yeah, I honestly I have to say like my time at Temple was really pivotal, and I think that I knew really early on in that experience. I remember, you know, I think like twice a week I'd be in the weight room by 6 a.m. and we would go, like many places, it's like we have rowing at 6 and we have cross country at 7 and we have something at 8 and something at 9 and things would barely slow down by 10 or 11 o'clock when I had to leave and go drive back to the suburbs to go to class. And, I just remember kind of I think all of us strength coaches kind of when we have so many things back to back in a day and then we kind of come down from that high of like, wow, that was like, I'm so fired up. Like I've been on the floor coaching all morning and this was awesome, and so kind of just really feeling like this is where I'm meant to be. And I also have to say in my own experience, I knew very early on in my time at Temple that I wanted to take a gap year. I felt that sense that like there's so much to learn here and learning from the grad assistants that were there at the time and okay, they're getting their master's degree and what are they studying and how do they okay, they're in the weight room all the time, but then they also take their classes and what that balance looks like. I think that, I started my internship at Temple in spring semester, so it was maybe the second or third week of January or something like that. I think that by the first week of February, I knew that I wanted to take a gap year the following year and do a full year internship before I really got into my master's degree. And a GA position just because I realized how much there was in front of me to learn and I didn't want to feel like rushed in my learning, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And that's what I always try to tell the interns that are coming up or any coaches that kind of reach out for advice too. Like it's hard when you don't realize the profession or you don't exactly know what you want to do until kind of later in your college career. And a lot of times some of these athletes or not some of the interns that are coming in that want to be coaches, they're starting to realize that they want to do that a lot sooner in their college career, like as freshmen or sophomores even now. So it's a little bit different than it was like I know when I started, or even the same with you. I mean, obviously you're still playing at that time too, so you're
Hmm.
kind of invested in that, but it almost seems like you lose valuable time to like where you could kind of learn or at least maybe kind of follow in the shadows of what the grad students are doing or shadow an assistant coach and kind of see what the day-to-day looks like, what the career path kind of looks like. And when you don't have that and you feel like you're almost like so far away and you're playing catch up, yeah, maybe the gap year or maybe like trying to find another internship or just trying to learn as much information as possible so you can almost like quote unquote like catch up to them so that you can be in their role one day and feel successful. Like it's it's better to kind of get more experience and kind of get some of that stuff under your belt.
For sure.
What was like the next step like after the internship and everything? I know you did another couple internships as well and then kind of moved on a grad position. Like how did you kind of facilitate that process and like still understand that like hey, this is kind of the career path I want to take. It might not be what everybody's is, but this is like the steps I'm taking. Like how did you kind of set yourself up with goals and everything to get to the position you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I finished up my academic, obligations. I graduated in May. I actually stayed at Temple through the summer. I continued interning through the summertime and just wanted to be around and was, was looking at postings for intern positions. I had applied to a few. I did a few interviews. Some of them were kind of the situation where you have to be enrolled in school, you have to be getting credit for it. Just certain things that just kind of didn't work out. And I don't know. I think people in athletics can probably relate to this where there were situations, there were opportunities that just felt like they weren't meant to be. I don't know, like nothing was working out. And it really started to get late in the summer. It was probably mid-July, maybe even the third week of July. And as history will write itself, so it turns out that I didn't know this at the time, but there was a posting for the University of Kentucky hosting their internship. And they were looking for interns, right? So I decide that I want to apply. At the time, I have a limited scope of who my references are, but Coach Hamill from my freshman year is someone that I'm like, hey, can I use you as a reference? As it would turn out, she actually did her master's at Kentucky. She was a GA there. And so she reached out to the staff. I think I did like a Zoom call. I think it was honestly actually a regular phone call because this was literally 11 years ago. Um, I did just a phone call, and I remember Coach DeVren at Kentucky calling me back. Like I think it was the next day, like it was a Friday, and he called me back and he offered me the internship, and I accepted on the spot. And I remember him asking like, "Are you sure? Like you want to think about it? Do you want to like talk to anyone?" And I'm like, "No, I will accept the internship. I will move to Lexington. I am just ready to go, and I'm really excited to just get hands-on experience however I can." And so that was my move. At the time, my philosophy was that I'm going to take a full year to intern. The first semester, I'm going to go to a big school, and the second semester, I'm going to go to a smaller school. And I don't know like why that it made sense to me at the time, and that was just what I thought I was going to do. And so I moved to Lexington in August after graduating in May and started my internship at Kentucky. I worked with pretty much every Olympic sport at Kentucky with the exception of men's tennis and I think the golfs. But I mean, I was on the floor for any team, any of other team. I was on the floor for swimming, for women's tennis, for diving, for baseball, for softball, for volleyball, for women's basketball. I had so much variety of experience, and I was really on the floor at least 9 hours a day. I mean, I was coaching. I was actively coaching from the time that my day started until it ended. And so that was awesome experience. And I learned a lot about sport culture and kind of the norms, like the norms of a softball team are just different than men's tennis or cheer or diving. And so kind of really getting to experience that. Um, and so I remember kind of meeting with the staff. I think it was probably October or so, and they asked me my plans for the next semester, and they were like, "Yeah, we want you to stay here." I'm like, "Okay, cool, I'll stay here." And so that was just what I did. I stayed through the spring, and so that kind of was a lot of the same in the spring. There weren't a lot of other interns there at the time, and so I got a lot of opportunity to really connect with all the staff and learn a lot of different things from the full-times and the GAs that were there at the time, which was super valuable to me. In the spring, I started trying to figure out what's my next step. The next step for me was going to be a master's and a GA position, hopefully. And so trying to figure that out, um, I remember the staff, they would start to send me GA positions that were just super far from home and really at places I never thought I would live. And again, kind of the same as that finding the internship at Kentucky, like it just didn't feel like anything was really lining up for me. Like there were opportunities, but they just didn't feel right. And so after a little while, my mentor from Temple, Claire Quibido, she reached out to me with a screenshot of a posting about a GA opportunity at Mississippi State, and something about it just felt right. I could have never imagined I would live in the state of Mississippi, but something just felt like it was meant to be. And so I applied, I reached out to the staff at Kentucky, and as it would turn out, the full-time coach at Mississippi State at the time was actually from Lexington and interned at the University of Kentucky, and they knew her very well. And so they were able to help me get connected, and I, got accepted into school, and I moved to Starkville, Mississippi that May. And so in that role, I took women's tennis and then I assisted with volleyball and softball as a GA. My second year as a GA, there was a coaching change with volleyball, and my boss knew that, I was passionate about volleyball. And so she let me kind of take over volleyball. So I had women's tennis and volleyball my second year, which was an awesome experience. But really just got to invest in lesser teams and be involved with them in pretty much every capacity. I mean, I was at volleyball or softball practice and women's tennis practice pretty much every day of the week. If the athletes were on campus, we saw them in some capacity. So that was a really good experience, but super different than Kentucky, going from this like multitude of sports, multitude of time on the floor to really being able to invest in a couple teams and be around for everything and really get a really complete picture of the program as a whole and not just what do they do when they come in the weight room. So that was awesome. I graduated with my master's, and then I did a fellow position at UConn, University of Connecticut, for a year. Um, Again, a major swing again because I went from volleyball and women's tennis and assisting with softball to be responsible for men's and women's swimming and men's and women's tennis. And so huge rosters, lots of moving parts, lots of bodies, figuring out how to program in a setting where there's 40 kids and me and maybe an intern or maybe the other person that was a fellow with me at the time. And so that was a huge learning curve of just kind of figuring out like what makes sense on paper versus logistically when it comes to programming wise. And then after a year at UConn, I got my first full-time position, which was at Georgia Southern. So I moved to Statesboro in July of 2019. When I was at Georgia Southern, I worked with men's soccer, track, swimming, softball, and volleyball as well. And so, again, that swing again from, okay, you did it with a big roster for one team and two smaller teams. Okay, now it's time to do it for five teams. And so, kind of managing that, which again, like great experience just to kind of bounce back and be able to wear multiple hats and handle multiple spinning plates all at the same time. And so yeah, so I was at Georgia Southern for a year and a half. After that, I got into my current position at Florida State. So I got here in October of 2020, sort of during all the chaos with COVID. And so here in my role now, I have indoor volleyball and beach volleyball.
That's awesome. It's a eclectic experience, and you kind of got you got the big school, small school, but you also got a little bit of kind of in the weeds, like with fewer teams. You also got to assist, you got to lead programs, you got a little bit of everything, which is kind of the best thing you can do early on in your career. And then like I always think like the way that you took it, where it kind of funnels down and you get to the point where you have two or three teams and you can kind of be a bigger part of the staff and have a bigger role and be more involved in more than just what's happening in the weight room and kind of pushing them out. Like that's kind of the approach that like I want interns and I want coaches to like kind of see. Like how you take your career path and like all the things that you do along the way, like what the order kind of looks like is is up to the person. And again, like kind of like you said too, like you got to find the right fit. You got to see what works for you as well. But I hope that the field is going more so where there's more coaches, but it dwindles down to the fact that you can be more involved and be a member of the staff because of how important it is, not just like the physical domain, but all the other different aspects that are involved in just strength and conditioning. It's more than just that. So that's really cool. And like I never realized it in the beginning, but like what you were talking about saying, like, is it a right fit? Like I think I never reflected on it, but there's a couple places where I realized I went there, I just didn't get that good feeling.
Hmm.
And you're like, and then I think later on in your career, you get even more and more and more picky about it because like location, like family, like all these different things kind of factor into what it is. So
Totally.
it's, I mean, you can't really be picky on the front end. Um, in a way, like you still have to kind of find something, but you're right. There's a big component to whether or not like you'll fit within the staff or you'll fit within the area and like the teams and stuff that's kind of structured. But the more experience you get on the front end, the more it's easier for you to kind of get involved with anything and then be choosy later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I actually am just reflecting now to a phone call that I remember so clearly having with my mentor, Coach Claire. It happened in the spring of 2016 when I was at Kentucky. I remember talking to her on the phone and I was just really overwhelmed by, what's next and kind of that what if it doesn't go right and what if I make this big move and it's not right and so maybe this could be a little bit of advice for younger coaches that might be listening, but I remember her being on the phone with her and she said, I've never regretted any move I've made. Like I've learned something from every place I've been, and maybe the weight of what you learn is different or the skill set that you develop at different places is different, but I think that's something that I would hope is it an encouragement to younger coaches is like you're you're gonna be okay. Like you're gonna end up in where you're meant to be and just trust that whatever is there for you to learn, if you're willing to figure out what is there for you to learn, then you're gonna be in a good spot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I did 5 internships over my career, and not all of them were great. And I could tell you that for sure. And there's a couple places that the places are on there, but those coaches are not that it's a very touchy subject with some of them. But I still learned something from all those places because
Yeah,
even if it's not necessarily what you anticipate going into the experience, it can also be like exactly what not to do, or
sure.
exactly like you could start looking at it and putting yourself in that person's shoes, or kind of understand what their role is and figure out how you would do it if you were there. And
Sure.
like you said, like every every place is like has an opportunity for a lesson, and it might not be exactly what you anticipate going into, but it's still helpful along the way. Um, the big thing too, like taken away from like especially your time at Kentucky, like you kind of got thrown to the wolves, and like staying for a longer period of time, like especially like in the beginning, is very beneficial too because you can kind of see what teams look like transitioning from in season to out of season. You can kind of see what the whole long-term athletic development plan like looks like, coaching changes or anything that kind of happens in that time. But like the biggest thing is like just the time on the floor, and like the
Right.
time coaching with all those teams. We've got interns. I've had interns in the past where some of them nowadays, like I understand they're trying to squeeze it in between classes and stuff, but I feel like we've got away from a lot of like the coaching and hands-on stuff, and now everybody's trying to develop curriculums and like go through these networking processes and do everything that they're supposed to be doing in class rather than actually, hey, this is the only time you get to coach. Get on the floor and
Go
coach.
coach. Yes. Yes.
No, that's
For sure.
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's something that it was a really critical part of my development. And, huge nod to the staff at Kentucky. They do an awesome job. Besides being on the floor, they would do some coach teach sessions where they would give interns something to coach, and the GAs or other interns might like go through, like they would act like the athletes, and then I would get feedback on like where am I standing? What's my vision line? How am I making sure that, this person just walked off to the side and they have their back to me and they're doing this exercise over here and they're supposed to be like, what am I doing? Like, how am I approaching that? And making sure that in the moment I'm seeing the right things as much as possible. I'm having opportunities to, make certain, like, give certain cues and all those types of things. And so drawing that awareness in a controlled setting and then doing it on the floor when I'm with, various teams, I think was invaluable in my own development for sure.
Yeah, I like what you said, like awareness. Like most of the interns are younger coaches. Like you don't know what you don't know.
Totally.
And it's even like the further and further you get into your career. I don't know if you feel this way, but like I know I sure do, that I get further and further away from like when I was a first time coach, like when I was first starting, or even like when I first started training, some of the things that you really had to focus on and really had to emphasize, whether it's like how you unrack or re-rack a bar, how you brace, like where you stand when you coach, like understanding that your back is to the athletes, they can't even hear you, or like the music is too loud, like all those things that now inherently are just habit.
Hmm.
Like I have to like consciously try to remind interns, or like remind myself to tell them that like they don't know these kind of simple things, and these are important things of emphasis that like when they come in, there's so much stuff going on, there's so much stimulus, like they don't even know what to look for. They're focusing on the wrong things rather than, hey, you got to build kind of this foundation and understand that like these are all the mistakes I made, and like what I'm doing, I'm not going to say it's advanced, but I'm more comfortable in the situations because of all the reps I got. And you have to earn those reps your way, but I can help you kind of through some of the faults and maybe help you fail a little bit faster so you can maybe have a better career and speed up your career. But you still got to go through some of those hard times yourself and earn it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think failing faster is like a great term. I think the older or more experienced I get, I think I can identify situations earlier on where I know that an intern is about to make a mistake. And it's not like it's not life or death, right? Like I know that there's something they're not considering. And so me being able to be in a position where yes, we want to give our interns like a great experience. We want to let them have the experience, but with guardrails, right? So making sure that things like safety, anything like that, but at the same time, if I intervene and stop the failure before it happens, I'm not really helping this individual become a coach. Like I'm not really helping them figure out, oh shoot, I needed to actually do this or do that, or I needed to not do this, not do that. And so letting them fail faster, but also letting them fail in general. That's how I learned is messing up and failing in on a micro level. So I think that's a huge piece of development for any coach as well.
Yeah, that's a really good thing too. Like understanding that, like at some point in time, you're gonna touch a hot stove. Like you don't want to scorch your hand where you can never feel it again, but you learn that lesson, you'll never forget it. So having
Yeah.
an intern kind of fail in a controlled setting where that lesson really sticks and no one's getting hurt and like safety is an issue or anything like that, like that's the perfect way to do it. And if you can fabricate those scenarios in a way or like see it happening and then wait for it to happen and then kind of address the situation and like make sure they realize what happened, like that's the best way to do it. It's going to ultimately like aid to their success and benefit them in the long run. So that's great. I know throughout your career, like I mean, starting from like having a love for volleyball and then continuing that through your collegiate career, like you've still kind of at most of the stops been able to like get your hands back in it a little bit. And now like kind of that's your bread and butter, like both on the court and then also in the sand. So like how is that, how much more exciting is that to you that like the sport that you really enjoyed playing, like you get to work with them nowadays and like how is it easier to kind of relate to them because they're playing that sport for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to kind of start back towards the beginning of my career coaching. When I was at Temple and when I was at Kentucky, ironically, at both places, I didn't work with volleyball a ton, but specifically, I didn't work with volleyball until my time was almost coming to an end. Like at Temple, I think I only worked with volleyball in the summer, like for the month of July before my internship kind of wrapped up. And then at Kentucky, I think I only worked with volleyball from in the springtime, like from January until they started team practice. And then for whatever reason, I think scheduling wise, I wasn't with them anymore. But that actually, I think, really set me up in a really positive way because if I would have come into an internship and been with volleyball off the bat, I think that would have been really inside of my comfort zone. I mean, all of it was really exciting and new and overwhelming for me in a lot of ways, but I still think volleyball it's still my wheelhouse even at that time when I think, okay, my playing career is over and my new chapter of being a coach. And it wasn't like a coach that works with volleyball, it was just a strength coach, right? And so kind of being able to separate those things and have experience with so many other sports. There was a little bit of volleyball involved, but minimally compared to the volume of all the other sports. And then kind of going into my next few steps, I never really set out that, okay, I want to work with volleyball in the college setting. I really was super open. I have like an interest in the sports science realm, so I thought like field-based sports would be where I would end up and looking at GPS data, something like that. But I was really open. And so just the way that things kind of shook out, like I mentioned before, there was a coaching change when I was a grad student, and I got the opportunity to kind of rise to that just as a resume builder, really. When I was at UConn, I assisted with volleyball. My mentor at the time, he was out on paternity leave for a little while, so I got to work with volleyball while he was out. And then I don't know, all the pieces kind of just fell into place and I think that the way that I describe it in my career is that I found volleyball as an athlete, but I feel like volleyball found me as a coach. And I was never really set out to you know, want to, work with X level school volleyball or beach volleyball. It just wasn't really on my radar necessarily. And um, so yeah, I think that's like an important point of being willing to get out of your comfort zone intentionally and not because you're being forced to, but because having that like humility to say like what's going to challenge me the most. And so that was my perspective. I think working with indoor and beach now and having some, playing experience myself, I think indoor, especially, I have a huge appreciation for the positional needs, understanding that, liberos and middle blockers are not the same and they shouldn't be trained the same. And so figuring out what is the need of the position group and then how can I translate that to the weight room has been a really fun thought exercise that I've been doing for 5 years, almost 5 years at Florida State. And it's ever evolving, ever changing and adapting. And just like any other team or any other sport, there's positional needs, but then there's also kind of that conversation of what does our roster look like right now and how can I kind of marry those things together. So that's been really fun. Um, I guess the next thing, I guess, for indoor that I would think through too is understanding a little bit about like the offense that the team runs. And so that affects some of the positional demands of setters and things like that. So having an understanding of that, which kind of came pretty natural for me just because of my experience playing and certainly watching a ton as well of volleyball as well. But then I think the other piece of it that is probably my favorite is trying to use volleyball as like a connection to my athletes. Like, for example, mistake recovery, right? You bomb a ball out of bounds on your serve. Like, how are you coming back for the next rep, right? You fail a rep on your back squat, but like it was, I don't know, 70% for 5 reps or something that you shouldn't necessarily fail, but it went wrong for some reason. Okay, how do we regroup and go back and do it again? Because that's what volleyball is. It's a game of errors. And so I love kind of drawing those correlations. Um, I've said this more times than I can count with my beach athletes is, when it's 13-13 in the third set and we play to 15, win by two, what are you going to do in that moment? Like, how are you going to rise to that challenge? And so really being able to connect on a level that makes sense to them because the sport is the most common language that I have with my athletes, the sport of volleyball. So really being able to kind of be creative with that and understand like I know what it feels like to have an easy ball come right to you and for some reason you shank the pass. And as mad as you are, you have to literally shake it off and get back and get ready for the next ball and like want it to come to like okay, I want to be served the next ball. I want it to come right to me because I want to make up for the mistake I just made and I want to prove it to myself and kind of rise to that challenge. So,
No, that's great. It's for individuals that don't necessarily play that sport or haven't played that sport before. That's one of probably the lesser known things is to try to figure out what that common language is. Because as soon as you can speak that athlete's like sport and tie it into like what they're doing in the weight room or what they're doing in conditioning sessions, or even like you said, like bouncing back and making a recovery off of a mistake, if you can correlate those two, like it has such better meaning. It sticks with them because they already know that feeling. They've missed that block thousands of times. They've missed the serve. They've hit the net thousands of times. They've missed all these plays thousands of times. So they can immediately like refer right back to it and understand what that feels like. They might have only missed like maybe a handful of squats in their life, like just understanding that. But if you can tie that into what they already know and like what they're really truly passionate about, it sticks with them a lot more too. And yeah, I mean, that comes innately too, because you understand the experience. Like that's the same thing for when I talk to like lacrosse players. Like I know that because I know the feeling, I know the position, I know what I'm supposed to be in. Even if I can't like, or I don't want to articulate it a certain way, I can just, I can kind of use like short phrases or show the position because I know what it feels like and it clicks so much better. So it's super easy. Did you play beach at all growing up, or was that a little bit that
no,
you had to
well,
kind of
so
learn along the way?
yeah, so that's actually been interesting. Growing up in Philadelphia suburbs, there was not a whole lot of beach volleyball. I mean, the Jersey Shore is not far from where I grew up, but there's a little bit of grass, some grass tournaments. I played in a handful of grass tournaments the summer after I graduated from undergrad. And it was a lot of fun. I just, would one of my college teammates would sometimes need an extra person. Okay, sure, I'll hop in. Mostly doubles, sometimes fours. Um, but that was a big thing that, I had no experience working. I had never worked at an institution that held beach volleyball as a sport, and I had no experience really on the beach side. And so that was something that when I got to Tallahassee, after my first school year ended, there's actually a league here in town that it's a beach league, it's doubles, and I was like, you know what? I really, it's still volleyball, and I'm sure I'll still have fun, but also like understanding the dynamics of the sand was something like so foreign to me at the time, and how to run in the sand and move in the sand and just what does it feel like? What are the sand legs? What are the heavy legs and all this stuff like that. So I started playing in that league. I've played on and off actually over the years. Like I took a little break a few summers ago and I got married, but yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It's like once a week and you play like anywhere from 6 to 9 sets to 15. Each one's like with a different partner. And so it's just a fun way for me to be active, but also like I don't know, have a little bit of connection with my athletes on a very, very, very much lower level for sure. But just to kind of get that exposure myself. And as a coach, I think that was a piece that was something to me that felt like it was in my control. And so if I can do something that I felt like I was investing my time in something that's going to help me be a little more confident with my athletes, I'm like stepping into a really incredible opportunity to work with a high level beach program. And I've never, I've never even watched a college beach match. I mean, I watched them on YouTube, but that was it. And so how can I kind of stack the deck in my favor and give myself some confidence was definitely how I looked at joining that league, but I have a lot of fun with it. So
No, that's great advice too. Like, and yeah, not having worked with beach myself either until like I got to UNF, it was very different. And I think everybody's first reaction is, okay, well, just do exactly what you do, like for indoor, and then it's in the sand. And even just running on the sand, if anybody ever runs on the sand, like you know the difference between like running like close to the shore and like hard packed sand, like wet sand, like there's such a difference. And most of the time you're just running straight. And then
totally.
you start adding jumping, you dive, like you're recovering, you're changing direction, you're trying not to bump into your partner. Like there's all these different aspects that go into it. And I remember two like distinctive times, like when I had a sport that I was like just learning. The first time I had tennis and we did like a modified 5-10-5 like on the court and I just watched the first kid slide for everything. And I was like, I looked over at the coach. I was like, does that count? I didn't know. And then I watched the beach girls like run and they were jumping like into some of the turns, like some of the times I'm like when they're getting tired, I was like, wait a second, this is not I would have never expected that unless you
Sure.
have actually gone to practice or seen it or like for yourself, like to go in and like try to play. So I make a statement. I'm like, I'm not ever gonna coach them with my shoes on because that's weird. And I'm gonna make sure that I like get on the sand and I understand like what it feels like to jump, what it feels like to cut, what it feels like to turn even
Totally.
if even if I refuse to let them try to serve balls at my face. We're not doing that. But
That's awesome. No.
but yeah, to relate to them and kind of get an understanding, like it definitely gives some buy-in and it helps, but it's awesome to kind of see even someone with such a high level experience, like and broad experience with the indoor game, like how different it is, and like you're still invested to go and learn a sport that seems so similar, but it's got so many differences. Like, what would you say, like maybe are the biggest things that kind of like set those apart, whether it be not really the structure of the game, but like how maybe you approach them with their training? I know positionally, like indoor is way different and stuff like that, but how do you kind of differentiate between the two?
For sure, yeah, a great question. And you're exactly right that I think from the outside looking in, I think there is a possibility of like, well, it's just like indoor, but in the sand. You're like, well, it's actually not even close. And so, yeah, I think when I look at the two sports and specifically the athletes that I work with right now and over the last few years. I would describe indoor as, an inch wide and a mile deep, right? It's very, very skill based, right? And that comes with the positional aspects, right? They can do an inch wide of skills, but they can do them at a very, very high level, the same exact movement every time, time after time. They transition off the net with the same exact footwork. They swing block to the pin, the exact same footwork, time after time after time after time, to the point that they don't even think about the steps that they're taking because it's so ingrained, right? I would say that beach is the sport of beach volleyball requires a well-rounded athlete, right? You might be serving, you might be running down a ball, you might be hand setting, you might be blocking, you might be literally doing any skill at any moment during any point of the match. And so being able to understand that beach volleyball players, yes, maybe you have a blocker and a defender together, maybe your pair does half and half or split blocker. But realistically, those players need every skill that is required by the game. And so, kind of trying to match that, I already kind of talked about the positional training with indoor, but really being able to kind of dive in more with that and make sure that my programming for beach creates a very, very well-rounded athlete. And then with indoor, I need a very well-rounded middle blocker and setter and libero and outside hitter. And so being able to kind of give the training programs to each of those athletes in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Didn't make sense when I first started too, because I was just trying to figure everything out. And I remember doing questionnaires with the girls the first year, and like I hadn't changed a lot of it except for like what the sport was to be beach. And I remember them giving it back to me, and like one of them came up and was like, "What do I write for position?" I was like, "Write your position." And they're like, and they just wrote beach, and I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, I had thought, I was trying to think, I was like, isn't there's got to be like a term for what it is, but you're right. Like a lot of them are very good generalists because a lot of it plays a part in who your partner is. And
Yeah.
like
Yep.
the style changes when you're paired with someone different, like maybe
Exactly.
what your abilities look like that day. And you need to be very well rounded because like it's not often that a partner like goes down or you get switched like throughout the season, but you still kind of need to be prepared for it because you will be completely exposed if that's your only skill is one thing and you lose that person. Like you that 50-50 split is now completely out of proportion. So
Totally.
it makes
Totally.
big sense. Hey,
Yeah.
so with those two teams, like you're constantly in season and you're constantly like in developmental season with one of them, and it's basically never ending because going all the way through to May and then like indoors already coming back probably for the summer, and
Yep.
then they're going all the way up till December, and then maybe you get Christmas before beach comes back. So it's just a constant flow of volleyball. But being with two teams, you can kind of, like we talked about, be a little bit more invested with them. So, how do you kind of like stretch out the training throughout the season? Like, how much are you kind of maybe doing stuff with them on the road or kind of touching on like some of more of those domains besides the physical one, just being in the weight room because you have the experience and kind of the time with just those two programs?
For sure. Yeah, I'll start with indoor first, just going through the calendar year in my mind. Indoor is interesting. I think the huge benefit that we have playing in the ACC is that our schedule is actually very predictable. We typically play Friday, Sunday. During the first couple weeks of season, we have tournaments, preseason tournaments. We most likely probably play Friday, Saturday on those instances, but for the most part, super consistent once we start our conference play, where it's Friday, Sunday. If we're on the road, it's two different places, Friday versus Sunday, but if we're home, both Friday and Sunday will be home. So that piece, I think we're really lucky because I know some other conferences you might play Thursday, Sunday, or you might play Wednesday, Saturday, or a random midweek. We do have some midweeks as well, but kind of that consistency piece sets us up really well. I will see the athletes any day that they're on campus. And so for indoor, typically if we're home, I mean, if we're away, we would travel on a Thursday and compete Friday, travel on Saturday, compete Sunday. So that leaves us with Monday as our day off. And then we typically have 2 days of training the next week. if we're home, we get that third day because Thursday we would be, at home preparing. And so balancing that out, but just trying to be as consistent as possible. And I mean, like I was just explaining, we are set up to be really consistent. So that's a really huge benefit for us. My involvement with indoor has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, whether I travel or don't. Some years I've traveled more than others. It kind of just depends on the group and the need and all those things. And I think this is an area that is really huge for us, is that I have a great relationship with our athletic trainer. And so situations where I'm not on the road, I have total faith in her, and typically we'll sit down before the team leaves, maybe on Wednesday or something like that, and we'll go through the itinerary, the calendar for the week. Okay, like looking at Thursday, we fly and we get in at this time and we're going to our serve and pass practice and then we're doing this. Okay, should we do a walking pool? Should we, do some recovery, mobility, foam rolling, whatever it is, anything like that. And same thing for Saturday when we're in between matches. So that's like a super important, like I have the ability to really rely on her. And then from there, I mean, we have, certain players that maybe play less than others, and if they want to do things, I'm kind of able to communicate that on a super individualized one-to-one level where it's not like, hey, anyone who doesn't play has this and this and this workout to do in the hotel gym or something like that. So being able to kind of connect on an individual level, I think is important, and that's what I've had success with doing for indoor. So yeah, so that's kind of the scope of what being on the road looks like for them, and being home as well. We'll do some, recovery stuff on Thursday or Sunday when they're home, or sorry, Thursday or Saturday when they're competing at home. But kind of pairing with our performance team and our athletic trainer when I'm not there, of being able to, talk after the trip of like, hey, like how are things going? How did this person do? I know they were dealing with, a shoulder or a knee or whatever it might be. And so getting feedback from her is really valuable and really critical. Beach, a little different, as you know, the season is just super dense and very short. And so with our time on the road, we are pretty much occupied from when we wake up for breakfast until we go to bed at night. And so that's kind of ebbed and flowed as well. Earlier on in my time at Florida State, if we had a gap between matches, I was definitely back at the hotel working with players that, maybe we're getting an extra training session in the hotel gym, or that type of thing. It really just depends on the year. It depends on the roster and the age, the training age, and that type of thing. I think earlier on in my time at Florida State, coming off of COVID, it felt like every athlete was behind, from a developmental standpoint. And so, like I said, that's kind of ebbed and flowed over my years working with Beach, but really making sure that I'm servicing the athletes however I can. And so being able to kind of support the girls that are maybe playing 3 matches in a day, and maybe like, you know, maybe in the moment it's more important for me to make sure that like this girl, she forgot her lunch and I need to bring it to her room, as opposed to being in the hotel gym to do an extra training session with another athlete. So kind of just making sure that whatever the need of the team is, I'm meeting it, and making sure that we're as ready as possible to compete at the highest level when it comes to, our matches and things like that. And I think the other piece with that for beach is that when we are traveling, well, when we're home too, but we'll do a lot of like activation primers in the morning before we compete. And so that's usually in the hotel gym. Sometimes if the gym doesn't have enough space, we'll just take some of the equipment outside, but we're hitting some, dumbbell squat jump variations and whatever kind of plyos that make sense for us after we're kind of warm and moving around a good bit. But our players respond really well to it, and it's something that's really become a staple. It was something that we used to only do at home, and at some point, I think this is our third year doing it on the road now, where it's just like, hey, let's it's not exactly the same as what we would do in a full weight room with squat racks and all the things, but we can still do something. And like I said, the players really are bought into it, which I think is a huge driver as to why I am bought into it, really. If they feel like it really helps them, I mean, I can tell you the physiology of why this helps you. Yes, it does, absolutely. But the players are super bought in, and we, just getting that positive response from them, it's something that we invest the effort to make sure that we can put it into the plans in the morning after we eat breakfast and as we're warming up for our matches and things like that. So
Yeah, that's key. I think you said like if they're not bought into it, it doesn't matter like all the research or science or how invested you are in it, it won't matter. Especially on the road too, when you throw in all the extra factors of just travel and not having the equipment you want access to, or I mean, depends on sometimes coaches like what you're eating on the road might not be every player's favorite kind of meal, or
sure.
if you're like some of my teams and it's like, oh, Jersey Mike's for the fifth day in a row, like I could go without a club sandwich for the next 4 years. There's just so many factors that go into it. If the athletes are bought into it and like they enjoy it, like that's the biggest thing. And I've found too, like especially like with during tournaments, beach is very similar to like wrestling, like the
Mhm.
team atmosphere, because there's always someone going. Like if it's a tournament, there's always someone wrestling. Their coaches are always spread so thin. Some people on the team are not going to do anything that entire tournament, and some people are going to wrestle four guys and be dead tired by the end of the day. And beach is the same way. You're probably going to ride your top five pairs. They're going to play all day, and then the other ones are kind of just left there to like fill in the gap. So like as a coach, like I've found that that's the best thing you can kind of do. Like make sure you're kind of the glue and make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. You can kind of facilitate a couple things, but you're just trying to make sure that there's not a big disparity between like the top pairs and then like who's like the last one off the bench and just
For
make sure
sure.
everybody's still kind of going the right direction. So definitely cool. I've enjoyed my time kind of working with them, and it's kind of cool to see how you do it and see how the differences are between like two sports that from the outside look very similar. But kind of touching on like I know you talked about getting on the beach and getting on the sand a little bit yourself to play, but I know that's not going to be the main component if it's once a week or you take some time off from it just to kind of get used to it. But how do you kind of like how have you transitioned your own playing career, staying involved in the weight room, kind of training yourself to maybe like think of the plan for your teams moving forward or like goals and training you have for yourself and kind of just stay active as a coach.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in my own experience, early on as a coach, my own training was definitely a very Olympic based. It was very Olympic lifting based. Um, Twofold to that, kind of that was what I was taught as an athlete, but then also the influence of the mentors that I had early on, and understanding the importance of, similar things to what you've talked about is like I have to be a very competent Olympic lifter if I'm going to teach Olympic lifting to my athletes. I believe that Olympic lifting is something I want to implement, and I I don't want to say that I don't want to say I would never change my mind about that, but if I work with volleyball athletes, it probably makes sense for them. And so that's something that is definitely a part of the puzzle. I would say for me personally, that was a big part early on. It's definitely become a less significant part in my own training. I think for me, a couple things that come to mind. The first thing is like when I train, like that is ultimate me time. It's like my chance to hang out with myself and be with my own thoughts and just kind of like check in with myself and I don't know, just have disconnected time from the world a little bit. I'm not really a person that is gonna, buddy up with someone because I will honestly just get totally distracted if I'm training with someone. I am the distractor in that scenario. And so it's time that I just like to be able to be kind of flying solo in a lot of ways. And so yeah, I think the next piece is that I honestly, one of my athletes was actually asking me not that long ago, like, oh, like, do you have a workout card like us? And like, what do you do? And I think the thing that's probably I told them, we were in a van actually, like, driving down to Manhattan Pier a few weekends ago. And I was like, I think the biggest thing for me is like, as in my own training, I actually don't mind monotony. Like when I get into something that I'm interested in, like I will do it tw 2 or 3 times a week where I'm like, you know what, this just suits me right now. And when I get bored of this, I'll try something else. And I'll probably do that, borderline at nauseum. And then when I get bored of it, I'll change it up. Where in explaining this to my athlete, I'm like, you guys do something different on Monday compared to Wednesday and Tuesday compared to Thursday and so on and so forth. But in my own training, I find that, if something's working for me, I don't need to necessarily change it until I feel like it's not working for me. So yeah, I think that's been kind of the biggest piece um, in my own training. So yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had those points and times too where especially in season where like everything's chaotic and a lot of times you're kind of at the mercy of what the schedule looks like and if weather changes, if a game time changes, if schedule changes, meeting changes, like there's so many like different things that like are thrown your way. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just stick status quo and kind of just land right across the board when it comes to training because you know you can get it in, you know it's still a good solid program, but you don't need to like get up in yourself and realize like are there so many factors that are going to mess up my lift now? Like you still get it in. So I definitely know that kind of feeling. I also rub myself the wrong way trying to like fit fit exactly what I want to do into a spot that just doesn't work out and get upset about it. But I'm working on that as we kind of go along. But I'll figure that out when
Yeah. Simple
one
is
day
better.
eventually.
Yeah,
Hey, so I know we kind of touched on it a little bit too, like some coaching advice and stuff that you had over the course of your career, but like you took a different path, and like we said, everybody has a different kind of approach to what it looks like. And I mean, you're in a position right now, like where you've been at Florida State for a long, t like going on what, 6 years now?
5 years, almost
Five,
five in a
yeah.
year.
Yeah, so like for honestly, for anybody that's in the college setting, like 5 years as like kind of like a landmark thing, and then you could keep going from there and obviously like enjoy what you're doing and everything. But the career path is very different. Is there anything that like either going back you would have liked to do a little bit more of or kind of change, or do you have any advice for any like young coaches kind of coming up? Like that maybe like see your career path and want to emulate it that you might say, hey, consider this as you're going through the course of your career to kind of get to this place because in 10 years, like everybody wants to be where you're at, but there's a lot of steps in the way to get to that point.
For sure. I would say the biggest thing that advice, I guess, or guidance is find a scenario where you love what you do. And that's really where I'm at. Like, I look forward to going to work every day. I love the athletes I get to work with. I love the people that I get to be around. I love, you know, I really enjoy the responsibilities I have. That's a piece of it too, like the X's and O's side of things. But I think like you can't fake joy. And my role right now, like it just brings me so much joy to get another day to do it. Like I really feel super privileged to be in the situation that I'm in. And I think that's something that, you know, um, the saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I work. I mean, I have a lot of responsibilities and it is hard work, but I love it and I really enjoy it. And so if that's indoor and beach volleyball at Florida State, if that's, I don't know, lacrosse at who even knows where, like it could be whatever it is for whoever's listening. I think find what really brings you joy. I think is the biggest advice that I could give because it's going to set you up. I mean, I talk to my athletes as an athlete about being resilient, but coaches have to be resilient too. And the thing that makes me resilient as a coach is the fact that I'm in a situation where I absolutely love what I do and really look forward to it. And it brings me a lot of joy and I have a great passion for it. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's great advice. I like what you said too. Like obviously that quote like kind of is beaten down all the time and
for sure.
it's a good quote, but I think the caveat that you put to it like that kind of takes it to another level is like you still have to work. Like someone could have a passion for something that's self-destructive and they're not good at their job, but they still love it and they're passionate about it, and you still get you fired. At the end of the day, like you still have to be successful and you have to put in the effort, you have to put the time in. Like how do you manage those sort of things? Because you love what you do and everything, but like there are still scenarios where like stuff like that can be taken away. Like we kind of know like where the trajectory of college is, and it's wins and losses are still important. I know how you attribute them and how you like put the pressure on a strength coach for being successful or not successful for those wins and losses is up in the air. So how do you kind of make sure that like you're constantly like working towards staying in a position and in a role that like you're passionate about?
For sure, yeah. I think for me, looking at looking at it more from like a strength and conditioning kind of departmental standpoint, I think trying to invest in the people around me. And so I'm in a role right now where I feel like I get poured into by my coworkers, and I have the ability to kind of like turn that energy over and invest in some of the younger coaches on our staff, our grad assistants and our interns and things like that. And so just putting myself in that role to be able to support others around me is something that, I am a product of the people who have invested in me. And so I want to pay that forward. And also, selfishly, I want to take advantage of the knowledge that the people around me have. I can learn from anyone. I can learn from our grad assistants. We've just added women's lacrosse at Florida State. This is the first semester where we have student athletes on our campus, and so like I've never been a part of a program that has started from ground zero, and so like talking with them, like, kind of getting the chance to like learn the things that they're going through, connecting with my other coworker who works with track and learning from him. And so all these kinds of different learning opportunities that I can, I'm be willing to find ways to continue to grow as a coach, I think is super important to me. And I think, again, like resilience as a coach is like, I'm not the same Coach Shannon that I was this time last year, or definitely not when I got to Florida State. And so being curious about how I can continue to learn um, and I don't know, being open to learning about things that maybe are outside of my quote unquote wheelhouse. I mentioned before, I'm passionate about sports science um and I have an interest in that realm. But what if I want to spend some time learning about I don't know, like our movement screening system that we have and look at like corrective exercises and things like that. Like I think being willing to not just take the easy road is super important as a coach when it comes to your own development. And again, going back to the very beginning, like I love the ability to be able to rise to a challenge. And so, if in the context of learning, like what is the most challenging thing I could learn about that would be the most out of my wheelhouse? I think that's for me how I really try to stay invested and make sure I'm growing as a coach.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that's kind of one of the things that got you driven into it was just the challenge and kind of wanting to rise to it and kind of work towards it. And that's a perfect way to do it. Like staying open-minded and understanding that there's so many other things that can be learned and so many different aspects that you can kind of add to your toolbox to really improve your coaching and at the same time impact your athletes. Like that's huge. And we preach it to our athletes all the time, kind of like making those like investments and like trying to have a good return on your investment throughout the course of the year, like over the course of your career, like leading into whatever you want to do past collegiate. So if you're not doing that as a coach, you're not setting a very good example for what the athletes are, or you're telling your athletes. And no one wants a preachy coach that's not really trying to stay true to what they're saying. So that's a perfect way to say it. Well, hey coach, like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and we already talked about it. Like, so we got a little mistake recovery, which will be our overtime for today. But you can go rapid fire with them or take your time on any question. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready. I don't know how fast I'll go, but I'm ready.
It's all right. I think most people don't go fast anyway, so it's easy enough. All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength conditioning profession and favorite either indoor or beach volleyball athlete of yours
Ooh,
of all time.
of all time. Oh my goodness, this is a good one. Biggest influence, I would probably say Claire Quibido. Favorite volleyball player of all time. Wow, that's awesome. I would probably say. Micah Hancock. She's a setter. She played in college when I was also in college, at Penn State, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. Hey, so what can you be found doing like when you're not coaching, when you're not on the road? I mean, like we said, your schedule is crazy, but when you got some downtime, like what kind of recharges you? What are some of your hobbies that you like to get into?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say when I'm not traveling with my teams, I spend a lot of time traveling otherwise to see my husband. He actually lives in New Orleans, and so we do the long distance thing. So we try to see each other definitely as much as possible. We both coach, and so we both have busy lives, busy schedules, but see each other as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes it difficult, but traveling makes it fun a little bit too.
Yeah, for
So
sure,
that's
for sure.
perfect. Hey, so if you've given it any thought, I know, like you said, you're passionate about what you do, but if you had to pick a different career path, what do you think you might be doing if it weren't coaching right now?
If I was not a strength coach, I would probably be working in data analytics in some way.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right, the sports science thing makes more sense now. All right. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, like what is the music that's kind of playing on the speakers if you're in control? And what is your favorite like post-training meal after that session?
It's a good one. Music. I, like I said before, I kind of I get on kicks where I do a lot of the same. So right now, I'll share my kick right now. Music-wise, I've been listening to a lot of Paramore radio, just tried and true. Very millennial of me, probably, I would say. Um, Post-training meal. I am gonna go with I'm Italian. I love Italian food, so I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with chicken parm. That's a good one. And a good
Okay.
chocolate milk.
All right, that's not bad, not bad. I like that. All right, so last one I got for you for overtime. What is like been or first one either comes to mind or maybe most defining moment or kind of biggest lesson that you think you've learned like over the course of your career so far?
Biggest lesson, I would say, be a human before anything else. Be a human before I'm a coach, before I'm an athlete, because that's the only thing that everyone on this planet has in common. And so, as a coach, I think early on, I felt like I had to be this, proper, serious, like have this image projected out. And the more time I spend coaching and the more experience I get, the best feedback I get from my athletes and the best connection I get from them is just when I'm just myself and nothing more, nothing less.
No, that's perfect. That's being authentic and kind of being genuine, especially being true to yourself. That's huge. Athletes, as much as I think we thought when we were first starting off and like we want like to portray a certain whatever persona or like outwardly project like a just well put together coach. Like it's great. It's all well and great, but it's way better when you can actually talk to your athletes and relate to them and they understand that like, hey, you make mistakes too. Like they feel like they can relate to you. But the biggest thing is like you're trying and like we talked about like resiliency and trying to rise to those challenges. Like that's more important than being like perfect across the board. So
100%. 100%.
awesome. Hey, well, for anybody that's got any follow-up questions or want to kind of check in with, I know your playing schedule or come out to any games, things like that, where can they kind of get a hold of you and follow along?
Definitely. I I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter/X. So my Instagram is Shannon dot underscore Boone. And then my Twitter is Shannon underscore P underscore Boone. So yeah, I would say I probably am a little bit, I'm on both. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not like a huge social media, influencer by any means, but yeah, happy to connect with anyone.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure everything gets linked together. And like I said, I appreciate you coming on today. Good luck with the rest of your season. I know by the time this probably comes out, it'll be we'll see where we're ending up, but hopefully we'll see each other when NCAA's roll around.
Yes, yes. Best of luck to you guys as well, and look forward to hopefully seeing you in a few weeks.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Coach. We'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.